Landing my first couple of internships is probably one of the most hardest things I've ever had to do in my career. And I have had a career of over 4 years of experience in software engineering. I'm making well past 200K today. And that is still the most difficult thing that I had to do. So I'm going to walk you through exactly step by step the things that I had to learn and the things that I wish somebody would have told me when I was younger to make the process a lot easier and increase the odds of success. So the first thing that you need to understand is, why do they even hire interns? I think most interns don't actually know the answers to this question. They think, oh, companies are doing it for the sake of their heart. I don't know. They want to grow the younger generation, which is like partially true, yes. But again, there's no business in the world that does things for the good of their heart. A lot of the 99% of the time, they're doing it for money and profit, specifically for business needs. And interns actually do fill a void in the workplace, and there is a need for them, especially in big tech companies. So I'm going to walk you through exactly why they want to hire you, and then you can use that to translate how you brand yourself. So if they're looking for these very specific details and you have these details on your resume, then of course they're going to pick you over anyone else. So let's get straight into it. The first thing they specifically hire interns for is, a lot of engineers hate doing the grunt work. They hate testing, they hate QA, they hate debugging. They hate like writing one-off scripts for marketing teams. They hate writing one-off scripts from sales teams. There's always these like small little requests that devs have to do that shies away from actual feature development. And so what they do is they end up hiring a bunch of interns and offload all the tech debt and all the work that they don't want to touch to the intern, so that the senior engineers and intermediate engineers can then focus on the main product, what delivers them value and what makes them the money. So the work that they delegate to interns isn't necessarily, it's not that it's not important, it's more so it's mind-numbing, and they wouldn't be able to do it for long periods of time. So somebody who's an intern for 4 months, and also they're more excited and motivated because they're early on in their career, would be able to do this work without burning out, versus a senior software engineer who's going to be there for the next 2 to 5 years. They cannot picture themselves doing this work for that long. And so that's one of the major benefits. Why do they hire intern? For testing, for QA, grunt work. I don't know how else to describe it. What else? One-off requests from sales/marketing. Let me also make this smaller. Do 20. So one-off requests from sales and marketing, and these are primarily, then they do other stuff like events planning, then hackathons, and then make their product more visible. They make them go to networking events and stuff. So there's a bunch of stuff that they hire interns for. It's a very cheap and fast way to get highly qualified candidates to take off some of the load from the main team. So now that you have that understanding, the importance of having some of these, especially testing and QA, on your resume, because most engineers who do have this on their resume are immediately preferred over other candidates, and most interns don't know this. And this applies to co-op students as well, but I'm primarily focusing on internships because I wasn't a co-op student. I didn't get into the co-op program because my grades weren't high enough. So now that you have an understanding of why they hire interns, now we need to get into how to brand yourself. So there's multiple ways to brand yourself, and there's multiple channels to brand yourself on. The first and foremost thing that most of you will know is your resume. You need to make sure your resume stands out amongst thousands of other resumes, especially for an internship role, because the competition for internship and co-op is much higher than it is for senior software engineers. The reason is because there's more people looking for these internships than there are positions. When a company builds out a tech team, they'll have anywhere from 10 to 15 positions for actual software engineers that have graduated from school, and then maybe 3 to 5 for internships. So you can imagine, while there's more students that are being pumped out from universities, there's less positions for them to gain experience from. So it's extremely hyper competitive, and you really need to stand out. Resume. What exactly do you have to have on your resume? First of all, you have to show that you have an understanding of common software principles. You have to be able to build a backend, a front end. It depends on the role you're applying for. If it's like a backend role, then you got to be able to build an API. You got to be able to hook it up to a database. You got to be able to use ORM systems like SQLize or Mongoose if you're using MongoDB. and you just have to have a general understanding of it. It's mostly technology agnostic, unless you're applying to intern at a startup, where they generally do look for experience in a very specific tech stack. But again, for the most people, it's going to be tech agnostic. The idea is you have to have a general understanding of how backend works, or how front end works, or how cloud or DevOps works. Once you do that, then you want to demonstrate that on your resume by building out projects and highlighting those projects as if they were a work experience. That's what I did when I was applying for internships, and it worked really well. And they actually did count it as experience, so that was quite interesting. But the idea is that you want to build out these projects, and you want to incorporate testing and QA in these projects, because that's what they want. And once you've demonstrated that, you want to highlight that on your resume. There's a bunch of videos going on how to build a strong resume. There's also a million templates online that you can go and get for free. So I'm not going to go deep in detail about the resume. If you want my resume template, I have one for $50, links in the description. But again, I'm not trying to sell you my resume. It's just if you really want to see mine and you want to build it off of mine that landed me 3 to 4 internships, then go for it. Otherwise, there's tons of free resources online. You can use Canva, you can use Google Docs, Word, whatever it is. I would highly recommend you use Word, specifically because it makes it easier to pass application tracking systems. My resume template is on Google Docs, which translates to Word as well. So that's a benefit of that. So now that you've built a strong resume, there are a couple other ways you can build out a strong brand. Anytime you send a job application, the recruiter will almost always search you up on social media. And the main ones primarily they look for is LinkedIn, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter. They're doing this to make sure you're not a walking red flag, because if you're like sharing, I don't know, highly controversial stuff on Twitter, it's probably not a good look for the company's brand. But on the other hand, they're also doing it to see if you're actually sharing information about in the tech space, and you're participating in extracurriculars, and you're not just someone else just looking for another job. You have something that stands out in comparison to everyone else. And especially on LinkedIn. If you build a strong presence and brand on LinkedIn by sharing content, by sharing ideas, and interacting with other engineers on LinkedIn, commenting on posts, sharing your opinions, not controversial ones, but like logical and intelligent ones, then it does help quite a bit in differentiating you out versus everyone else. So again, imagine the recruiter looks up Abir Abbas on Google, and all they find is some really gross, weird stuff. Of course, they're going to be like, okay, that's a red flag. In comparison, what if they find Abir talks about the importance of testing and QA frameworks like JUnit, I don't know, Mocha. Yeah, you got to stand out on social media. And I'm putting LinkedIn and Twitter as the 2 more popular ones. You could also optimize the other ones, but at least you should do is Google your name and make sure that things that show up aren't suspicious. The last thing you could do is branding yourself through communication. The way you articulate responses is a true test to your character. If you greet people on the initial interaction saying, hey, how's your week going? I hope you're doing well. I really hope the workload's not too high, versus, hey, or the profile pictures of a dog and you ask, oh, that's a cute dog. What breed is it? It's just these like interpersonal skills that you need to also build out that make a massive difference. If you're this monotone, like very direct and unsocial person, it doesn't necessarily hurt your chances. There's so many software engineers that are exactly like that, so it's not necessarily unique in any way. But it also doesn't help you stand out, so it doesn't increase your chances. So if you have a strong social presence and strong interpersonal skills, it does help you increase your odds of landing those roles. And the way you demonstrate that is on the initial phone calls or the initial LinkedIn message that you send out, or how you post on social media. So that's something to consider. Okay, so now that you have a good understanding of how to brand yourself, the next thing you want to do is create an application pipeline. And this is where you get your name and face in front of as many people that will be looking for internships, or maybe thinking about looking for internships. The only way, most people think the only way is through job applications, but that's not. And that's not even how I landed my first 2 internships. My first 2 internships were not from job applications, they're from cold DMs. That's right. Third one was from application, but the first 2 were from cold DMs. And I'm going to walk you through all the ways you can get your face in front of people. The first most obvious one is job applications. You typically want to look through all the job boards accessible to you. That's Indeed, LinkedIn, ZipRecruiter, Monster, Glassdoor. There's a bunch. I primarily use LinkedIn and Indeed when I was applying, and LinkedIn worked the best for me. But also, if your university has a job careers page, or if you're part of a co-op program, then you have access to a private portal that where you can see co-op jobs. But this is obviously the easiest and most obvious method. But also consider that because this is the easiest, this will also have the most amount of competition. So that means any application posted means other people saw it as well, and hundreds, thousands of other people will also send in their resume. So it's going to be extremely hard for you to stand out. So this is where a strong resume and social presence is important, but there are other ways. So before we dive into that, let's just jot that down. Job applications. The second way is to seek out recruiters directly and cold email or cold DM them on LinkedIn. And you'll see my other tab open right here. I'm going to actually walk you through how to do this on LinkedIn. So if you go on LinkedIn and you search up university recruiter, there are other job titles as well, talent sourcing specialist, but typically they're called university recruiters because they directly recruit from universities. So then you'll see people's profiles, university recruiter at Coinbase. So this person hires interns and co-op students for Coinbase. This person does for Unity, the gaming framework. Let's see, other university. And if you can't find university recruiters, here's another university recruiter. I don't know. If you can't find specifically university recruiters, that's also okay. You can reach out to regular recruiters or talent acquisition specialists and ask them if they're hiring interns for the summer or whatever term you're looking for. And you want to constantly follow up with them because they're not going to remember you when positions do open up. But if you message them after every 3 to 4 months and say, hey, just checking in if anything came by, then you're going to be in top of mind, and then they're going to be like, oh, yeah, this position is about to come up in a couple months or a couple of weeks. So do you want to apply for it? And there's no competition at this point because you're the only person they're talking to. So they're going to give you preference, and they're going to give you a much easier and faster interview process. If you can't pass that interview process, a different story entirely. But again, look, student recruiter, there are other titles like student recruiter at CPA, Ontario. There's other ways to reach out to recruiters. And I'll also give you an example of some copy you can send. So let's say university recruiter at Cisco, add a note. Hey, Matt, came across, actually, no, you want to start off by saying, I hope you're having an amazing weekend. Came across your profile looking for intern candidates, wondering if you're currently hiring for software engineering internships. Looking forward to hearing from you, Abir. And that's it. Short and sweet message. Hit send. Most of them are probably going to ignore you. That's completely fine. The idea is the more you send out, the more replies that you get, and the more follow-ups that you have, and over time you build a pipeline. And give it a couple of months, and eventually you'll be talking to 5 to 6 recruiters, and at any given time, one of them might have a role that aligns with you. So this is just something you got to build out, and you have to get okay with rejection because most people don't have time to even check their LinkedIn's. But the one that does, that's the one that's going to help you land a job. So it's a numbers game at the end of the day, but you still want to improve your quality in responses and quality in how you talk to them. So asking them small stuff like, how's your day? I don't know, what are you up to for the summer? Things like that do matter. Don't just go directly into a transactional relationship. Do you have a job? These are humans too, and they care about when you ask about their life and updates as well. Definitely do that. Cold outreach. And again, if you can't find the recruiter on LinkedIn, then what you could do is you can go on their website. I don't know. You can go to, I can't think of any website on the top of my head. Let's do Huawei careers email. careers@huawei.com. And then campus recruitment sub-regional contacts. So again, these are all emails that you should be cold emailing if you can't find the recruiters on LinkedIn. I don't know why you wouldn't be able to find a Hawaii recruiter on LinkedIn. There's so many on LinkedIn. But again, if you cannot, this is another way to get in front of their screen and get your name in front of them. So the last method of application pipeline is referrals. It's asking your immediate network. That means your friends, your family, everyone that you know, asking them if anyone knows of any positions open for internships or just temporary contract roles. This is so under-leveraged. This is also how I landed one of my internships. An internship that I did with one company, the CEO of that company actually was an investor in another company. And so I asked that CEO, hey, I'm looking for an internship this summer. Do you know anyone hiring? And you end up saying, yeah, like my other company always hires interns. You want me to refer you? I'm like, yes, please. And they referred me. I bombed the interview and I still got the role. So let that sink in for a second. It's because I had a strong referral from one of the top investors in their business. So of course, they're going to give me preferential treatment, and they're going to, regardless of the interview process, like they hired me. So that's something to consider. So you want to tap into your immediate network right away. Once you've built a strong application pipeline, then you got to master the interview process. The interview process is most of the time 3 steps. It's initial screening, the first technical interview, and then a behavioral interview. And if you pass all 3, you generally get an offer. And this applies to big tech companies, startups, it applies to medium-sized companies. It's very common across the board, and you need to master all 3. It's not like you can get good on one and they'll ignore the other. You have to pretty much be able to do all 3. The technical interviews are most likely going to be lead code interviews. They're probably going to be easy/medium. The way I'd recommend you master lead code is through practice of every day. It's just a grind that you're going to have to go through. You have to eventually recognize patterns. You have to understand the data structures and algorithms. You don't necessarily have to memorize algorithms. You need to memorize the patterns. The patterns like dynamic programming, binary search tree, depth first search, breadth first search, sorting. So as long as you have a general understanding and you memorize the key concepts like dynamic programming and you also memorize the data structures, you'll eventually start getting good at them. I'd say you need to at least solve about 80 problems on lead code, 80 easy/medium problems on lead code to start getting good at it. And once you start getting good at it, then I'd recommend you practicing the lead code blind 75 questions. So if you do blind 75 lead code, I'd highly recommend you go through this entire list and work through it multiple times. So a list of 75 questions that somebody compiled on blind, and most of these interview questions are from this list. Technical interview practice. There is a second type of technical interview, and I haven't really seen it for interns specifically, but again, it might come up. It's system design. So you need to be able to create a application architecture to build out an entire system. So that includes backend, front end, load balancers, database, communication layer, blah, blah, blah. You can look up the 3-tiered web architecture. That's a good resource, 3-tiered web architecture. And you can memorize this pretty much, or just at least understand it to a certain extent. Most of the time this won't show up. If it doesn't, at least you have a backup plan. System design, 3-tier web architecture. And then behavioral. Most people are good at behavioral interviews, so I'm not too worried about that. But again, to give you a general understanding of how to ace behavioral interviews, you typically want to use Amazon's STAR method. Behavioral. So the STAR method is an interview technique that gives you the straightforward format by laying out the situation, task, action, and result. So you typically want to have a story in mind of how you're going to answer the behavioral question. Regardless of the question, you can use the same story and adapt it in multiple different ways. So the question was, give me a time where everything went wrong and how did you go about handling it? So you could think of a story where a group project went royally bad, like your group members didn't show up, they didn't contribute to anything. You take that story, the situations, you explain that we had a group project for this course. 3 of the group members didn't even show up to class on the day that the group started, and they weren't contributing anything. So it's just me and this other guy or girl, and we were working on it together. So that's the situation. The task was we needed to build out a business plan for blah, blah, blah. And then action was, okay, so I decided to take leadership and build out the roadmap of exactly what we need to do and split it between the 2 group members that were present. And we didn't worry too much about the other 3. We tried to reach out to them and follow up with them, but again, no responses. And that was, our hands were tied, so we couldn't really do much there. And the result, we got a really high grade on the assignment and we did really well. The professor was extremely impressed that we passed, despite the fact that half our group member wasn't even showing up to the presentation. And that's a great example of an answer to this behavioral type question. You can use the exact same story for any type of other question. So another one would be like, give me a time where and the deadline was tight and you had to get things done fast, you can use the same exact story for that. So let me put STAR method. And remember, I also mentioned initial screening. I should have put that at the top. This is just to see if you're a weirdo and if you have walking red flags. Generally speaking, this is not even a behavioral. This is more of an observational piece where they talk to you to see if you're monotone, if you're excited, if you have questions about the company, if you're excited about the role, if you have questions about the role. And so generally speaking, you want to come prepared. You want to come prepared with at least 2 to 3 interesting questions. Don't just go for the typical, what's the day-to-day like in this role? Go for something exciting. If you had the choice between any other company in the world, why would you pick this company specifically? Ask the interesting question, put some twist on them. Because at the end of the day, when they answer these questions, they're going to release dopamine in their brain, and they're going to remember you, and you're going to stand out from hundreds of other initial screenings that the recruiter has to do on a daily basis. So the idea is it's a red flag check, first of all, and second of all, you want them to remember you and want them to fight for you, because a recruiter that's invested in you will go out of their way to help you prepare for the process and really make sure you pass. That's something to consider. And the last thing is follow-ups, just saying, let me fix that. Sending thank you emails after interviews, also to your recruiter as well, and asking for updates every 1 week or so. So if you don't hear back in a week, make sure you ask for updates. It's just to keep in mind that you're still in the process and you're on top of mind on the recruiter's end as well. And they get more and more invested as the more and more follow-ups that you do. And then if you get rejected, that's also fine. 3 to 6 months later, follow up with the recruiter again and ask if they have open roles and that you're really excited to try it again and you're much more, feeling much more positive about it. And it also shows that you learn from your mistakes and you're growing and you're willing to go above and beyond to get into this company. So sending thank you emails after interviews, following up after rejections, asking for feedback. So the only way you can really learn is from feedback. A lot of people think they do go well in interviews and then they get rejected. And most of the time it's because they don't actually know what means. It could literally just mean, oh, I was able to answer the question, but maybe they were looking for a specific response or like a more optimal solution for the question. And so once you ask for feedback and then you start understanding, okay, this is what I was missing, or this is where I needed to do extra work, that's when you start improving, and that's how you get better at interviewing. Feedback. That's it. If you master all 4 of these or 5 of these things, you're going to start landing internships at anywhere. That's not exclusive to small or medium-sized companies or big tech. You're going to land interviews anywhere, and you're going to progress in your career, and you're going to do amazing. So thank you so much for watching. If you like my content, like and subscribe, and I'll see you on the next one. Peace.